Proportional Response, Book 1. Chapter 24, Part 11, Echoes of Vintus. Deep Admiral Rolvan's body relaxed, by reflex, as the acceleration of his flagship pushed past the limits of its inertial compensators and pressed him back into his command chair, and he smiled. The webbing in his hands tried to flex in response to his shift in momentum, but his pressure suit prevented it. He put the annoyance out of his mind as the countdown on his plot reached 0, and the weight lifted from him as the ship's singularity finally formed, and they entered FTL travel. For a moment, the lack of pressure felt almost like weightlessness, until his body figured out that down had not gone away, just changed. More timers lit up on his display, showing him time until they reached the next system, time until they exited FTL, and estimated time to rendezvous with repair ships. A laugh barked from him as he remembered that Thermicon droning on about how the modern spacer's life was ruled by timers. Lights which had gone slightly overbright from the power thrown off by the ship's red-lined engines dimmed again, and reports flowed in. He let his people do their jobs, trusting them to draw his attention to anything too severe. He gave half an ear to the pitch and tone of his flag bridge, and felt satisfied that he'd done his job well. They had lost few ships taking out the Zoltan shipyard, but had left behind nothing but an expanding cloud of debris in their wake. Not that I would have lost any ships if that fleet had been as far away as they were supposed to be. I wonder if they were out of position because the Zoltans have learned to vary their patrols, or because of typical Zoltan incompetence. He pondered the question for a few minutes while he let his captains tend their ships. When the final casualty report showed up on his screen, he grimaced slightly. Nothing for it, might as well get the conversation with the captains out of the way. A few buttons caused the plot's display of their little corner of the galaxy and the fleet's FTL progress to give way to the faces of his captains. They look far too dour for a bunch of men and women who just scored a major victory. He felt a bit of pride in the fact that he could read the faces of the human captains. The Confederation had loaned him, just as well as he could, his own Arabso, but the moment didn't last long. One of his own Arabsos spoke first, with a flat glare.
"Intel popped the bubble on us, sir. We should have been out of there with hours to spare before the Zoltan fleet showed up, not screaming in retreat with them splashing our heels."
Rolvan twirled one eye in agreement, then moved his eyes in his people's equivalent of a human shrug while hiding his amusement at the humans' confused faces as they tried to work out the Arabso idiom. It didn't take long, and then the humans began to join in the general grumbling. "Oh, this won't do.
Such are the vagaries of war. Intel's information is educated guesses on incomplete data at the best of times, and you damned well know it. If their information was always perfect, every time, then they could just give out written instructions to the troops and order them to carry it out. Dealing with the inevitable unforeseen events is our job as commanders. Or have all of you gone soft by the string of easy victories we have been handed that you will grumble at a victory because it wasn't enough of a rout for you?"
He gave them all a hard stare, and saw that they all had the good grace to look abashed, though a few had some stubbornness to their countenances as well. Over a year of war, and we haven't seen losses like that since the opening months. He sighed inwardly. Nothing for it then. I hate to dress them down after a victory, but... He spoke as if mumbling to himself.
"You know the answer to that, Rolvan. They have gone soft on you. Well, no, maybe not soft."
He hardened his tone and turned his gaze back to them.
"Definitely sloppy."
Now all of them did show the proper chagrin.
"Furthermore, you sit there and try to make excuses for that by complaining of imperfect intel. You are better than that. Damn it."
Every eye, human and Arabso, was downcast.
"All of you, every single one of you, failed to perform at your best and let your crews act far too lax. Oh, you did well enough in the initial engagement, I will grant you that, but once we had the defenses down and started on the work of carving that station to bits, you got lag. It took far too long for you to recognize the threat once they hit the edge of our sensor spread. With how long it took my flag bridge and me to recognize there was a problem, I should have had every one of you howling at me for orders.
Wait for it. Wait for it. The implications of what he'd said sank into them slowly, and he could tell who had been actually listening to him dressing them down and who had half tuned out. Once every one of them had looked up, he chuffed at them.
Yes, I bear some responsibility for it all too, and my report will reflect that. It will also reflect that once everyone got their fins out of their asses, everyone responded with alacrity and precision. The enemy may have caught us blowing bubbles, but if any of you, or the crews that we lost, were one whit less the spaceman you are, we might not even be having this conversation. So, while I will not be putting anyone in for commendations for this, there will be no official reprimands either, and I will still entertain commendations for any of your own crews who performed above and beyond. Truth be told, Command has run us ragged these last several months, keeping the exaltants off balance, and something like this was bound to happen.
He shifted in his chair and sat forward slightly.
Now it has, and we got out of it far better off than we had a right to. We must all steady ourselves and make damn sure it doesn't happen again. To that end, I am taking 2 steps. The first is that I will be putting this fleet in for a week of R at the nearest convenient port with enough facilities to support it. The second is that I am going to drill the hell out of this fleet all the way there, and when we get back from R, we will drill even harder all the way to our next target.
This announcement met with bemused chuckles. Finally, one of his Arabso captains spoke up.
Sir, do you know what our next target will be? Something military, I hope. Destroying civilian targets is unsettling.
A chorus of nods went through his captains, human and Arabso alike, as well as a number of his command staff. He slitted his eyes and turned up his lips in displeasure. He rolled his eyes counter to one another in a gesture which would have been a rueful headshake in a human.
This was not a civilian target, or it wouldn't have been one for long. Look through the manifests of the cargo you loaded. That was retrieved as evidence for the Council. A certified retrieval team will be meeting us at our repair port to seal the cargo and take it away. The Altons were in the process of converting that construction yard to military purposes, so it was a legitimate wartime target.
He saw his human captains, both those on loan from the Confederation and the one who had sworn himself to the Arabso, nodding their heads. They understand this sort of war, one where you are trying to end your enemy's ability to fight, rather than simply gain an advantage, so they will quit. Too many of his own captains still gave him cold looks, however. Mine haven't figured that out yet. Time for a lesson I'd hoped not to have to go into.
It seems some of you don't understand the stakes here, so let me explain them to you, for I know them well. I was there at Vintus. I rode with our human brothers into battle when the best they could hope for was a draw, and the ability for some small number of their own to limp home. I was there when the human admiral pulled a reed out of a gonga and set the Zoltans back on their heels. I was there when the Zoltan voter, petty little thug that he was, saw that he could not win the fight and that his own precious scales had come under threat. I watched that Zoltan capital ship fire a slug meant to destroy the entire biosphere of the world we'd set to defend, and, my brothers and sisters, in deep waters, I looked in the human admiral's eye when he chose to move himself between the slug and the planet. Now, let me tell you something about that day, which few know. Something which didn't make it into the headlines flash all across League space. It was not only the Admiral who made that decision. You see, I watched the Admiral make his choice, and then the human called up the captain of his ship, ready to give fateful orders to his man. He didn't have to give the orders. The moment that Captain's face came on the screen, they both knew, and agreed instantly. There was no hesitation, no discussion, just grim determination. Something else you don't know. Not a single on-duty human left his station. The Admiral ordered them to stay in place, to fight to their last breath, so that more of their brethren could survive, and they did. Sure, the support personnel made for their life pods, as did many who were off-duty. But even many of those off-duty rushed to whatever open stations they could find, that they might spend their lives to keep a few of their own alive and give the nascent species below them a chance to survive. So, don't sit there and yammer at me about civilian targets, nor question the integrity of High Command. The Joint Admiralty we are taking orders from is led by a human, yes, and it is largely the humans who are calling the shots, but I tell you now, I was there when human morality was stacked against the morality of the Zoltans, and I will tell you, without hesitation, which one I prefer to live with. To that end, I will break every means the sultans have of making war if I am so ordered. Factories, roads, bridges, spaceports, dry docks, anything to deny those petty, spiteful thugs they call voters the ability to fling death and destruction down on entire planets for no reason greater than their petty pride.
He looked over his captains and his flag bridge and saw that everyone seemed to have sat up a little straighter. Many seemed like they wanted to stand and salute.
You have your orders, captains. Consider them. Consider what I've told you. In fact, do more than that. I think all of you need a refresher on just who and what we are fighting against. Every one of you is to review the Battle of Vintus and the council session which followed. I will send you specific files. Have your XO sit with you and discuss it. You have 3 days, then we will discuss the matter. Dismissed.
Rolvan gave orders to his second and strode off the bridge. He contained his fury until the door closed on his quarters. He dove into his bed and screamed under the water, then pulled that water through his gills and relaxed. He didn't want to do that to his captains. They were good men and women, but he couldn't let them continue to doubt themselves, nor the mission. He'd make it up to them, somehow.